studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Historian Neil Ferguson writing in the Free Press. Brace yourselves. A recession is coming. This was supposed to be a banner growth year. The war in Iran is choking global energy supply. History shows shocks like this rarely end without a recession, argues Ferguson. He offers a comparison to what happened in the Nixon years after a military aid package to Israel, 73-74. Nixon attempting to tilt the balance of power in the Middle East decisively in Israel's favor following the surprise attack on Israel on Yom Kippur. The retaliation took the form of oil price hikes by Middle Eastern oil producers, culminating in an embargo on oil exports the United States imposed by order of Saudi Arabia's King Faisal. The ultimate effect was to nearly quadruple the price of oil on the world market. And it took Nixon and Kissinger, who had understood this might be possible, but were nonetheless a little flat-footed, more than 4 months to get relief from that embargo. The result was a recession. That's the short version of the story. Now, that comparison is not, perfectly parallel, first and foremost, because the United States is not nearly as reliant on oil from OPEC nations as it was 50 years ago. So that's a big difference. But you still have a quarter of the world's oil supply flow through the Strait of Hormuz. And if it induces the failure to have that flow restart in short order, if it starts to produce lags and negative growth, say, in the second quarter in Western Europe, then the nature of our interdependent global economic relations, it's tough to see. I mean, you can see how this could domino if Western European countries go into recession. It's difficult to see, and frankly, Pacific Rim nations go into recession. It's difficult to see how America would not be similarly impacted. But, that's just one scenario. For the optimistic scenario, perhaps. Pleased to be joined by Steve Moore, economist and author of The Trump Economic Mural and the Plan to Unleash Prosperity Again, co-author with Art Laffer. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, me an optimist? I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're the hope, growth, and opportunity guy. So let's give us some hope about growth and opportunity.
So I lived through that in the 70s. I don't know if you lived through a period because you might be a little bit younger than I am.
Yes,
but I remember.
Barely I did, but I don't really remember it.
Packing up in the station wagon and then being ninth in line at the what was that? The Sinclair station in Glenview, Illinois. But listen, I think that we may well have a recession as a result of this. I'm not a military foreign policy expert, but I've always been a kind of non-interventionist when it comes to the Middle East. And so my preference has always been, let's just stay out of the Middle East and let them fight with each other. But look, I know people have strong opinions one way or the other about that. But when you see, and by the way, I do remember when the price of oil went from like $4 a barrel to like $30 a barrel in, a couple of years. And that just was gut-wrenching for the U.S. economy. I mean, it wasn't just a couple of years, by the way, Dan. The whole period under Nixon, Ford, and Carter was just one big oil disaster. And we never really got out of the recession. And then, as I like to put it, the sun came out, the clouds dispersed, and God gave America Ronald Reagan, and we ended that energy crisis by producing more energy here at home. That's what we have to do. And the one piece of good news in this story is that we are much more inoculated from OPEC and the flow of oil from the Middle East than we used to be. But as you said, 25 to 30% of the world's oil still flows through that Straits of Hormuz. And I guess my solution to this is let's just drill, baby, drill, keep producing as much oil as we can. The state in the United States that has the highest gas prices is California. There is no state in the country, maybe other than Texas, that has more oil than California does. So why don't they go after their resources? I'm frustrated by this.
The administration, Trump administration, invoked the Defense Production Acts to get those oil rigs back up and running in the Pacific. Even if California didn't want to your point.
Well, also you have to, Americans, they want their cars to run. We want to be able to fill up. We want to pay $2.50 a gallon, not $5 a gallon. But then they don't want. Well, we don't want to have. We don't like fossil fuels. Oh, okay. Well, we also don't like refineries. Okay, no refineries. Oh, we don't want pipelines. Okay, we don't want LNG terminals. Well, you got to have the infrastructure for the energy to work. And so I get frustrated with some of my liberal friends. Oh, gas is so expensive. Gee, why do you think that is? You haven't allowed us to produce the gas that we have. And so if I sound a little frustrated with this whole situation, I am, because the economy, as you said, Dan, I mean, remember when we were talking at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I predicted a blockbuster economy for 2026. Everything was set up. We were deregulating. We were producing more oil and gas than ever before. We had the big, beautiful tax bill. I mean, everything was going swimmingly. And now I am a little bit worried about a temporary recession. But we will come out of this. Look, at some point within the next 3 to 6 months, hopefully sooner than that, this situation in Iran will be resolved. We'll be out of there, and we'll be back to normalcy.
You don't have to name names, but, some of those economists.
I love naming names.
Okay, well, you talk to like a Kevin Hassett, or you talk to other economists that are part of or close to the president, and what do they say about these concerns? What can they say, I suppose?
Well, I think everybody's obviously concerned, including the president, about how the state of the economy, because it is the economy, stupid. It always is, and Republicans have midterm elections coming up. And look, if we haven't seen improvements in the quote affordability crisis, if we keep seeing $4 and $5 a gallon gas, I think Republicans could see historic losses in those midterms. I don't know how you read it there. I know you're in Florida. Did you see the Republicans lost a seat in Florida? Right.
Well, they lost two. They lost two state legislative seats, and obviously one of them was Trump's. The seat that covered Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. No, I mean, those are some canaries in the coal mine. And let me tell you, just talking about Florida for a second as an example, that complacency sets in. I don't see, like, Byron Donalds, I know, is the presumptive successor to Ron DeSantis, and Byron's my congressman, and I like him a lot. But that is not going to be a walk in the park this time, like it was for DeSantis 4 years ago. And you want to see a great story over the last 20 years, which is the state of Florida's surge to, along with Texas, economic dominance on a comparative basis, go by the wayside. Turn the state back over to that neo-Marxist party.
Yeah, and the thing that's scary about this is that Republicans are almost certainly going to lose the House because they only have a 2-seat majority, and usually even in a normal midterm, the out of power party picks up about 20 to 30 seats. But even the Senate is very much in danger, and I agree with you. Even a state like New York, Florida, or Texas, which Texas doesn't have hasn't a single statewide Democrat elected in 30 years or something like that. Everybody's vulnerable to this tide that is coming. Now, by the way, Dan, to change the subject for just a moment, I have a new favorite Democrat. Do you know who that is?
John Fetterman.
Yeah. Fetterman is causing heartache and who would have thought? Remember, we thought he was a crazy Democrat.
Well, I know.
He's the one who's making a lot of sense, and he's saying, "Look, I mean, folks, you should be very. I don't know what the lines are like in O'Hare lately at the TSA, but I was in Atlanta. I stood in a 2-hour-long line there, and by the way, I want to make sure people understand that this isn't like by accident Democrats want you to stand in line. They want you to suffer and stand in line for 2 hours so they can score political points against Trump. And the only Democrat in the entire Congress who will say this is lunatic, this is craziness, we're not serving the people, is John Fetterman, the guy who we thought was brain dead when he came to Congress.
I hear you. I wanted to on this affordability issue, too. It's obviously not just at the pump, and the administration has talked, trying to sort of manipulate the housing market to lower prices, which is not a good idea generally, in my view. One idea that they're kicking around now, which I think is another bad idea, is easing credit checks for loans backed by Fannie and Freddie, requiring only a single credit report rather than 3 credit reports. This is at the behest of the Mortgage Bankers Association. I mean, we used to talk about this in the context of Obama. Obama's second term. Did you not learn any of the lessons from 08, 09? But now, almost 20 years later, we have to say the same thing, in my view.
If your question is, do we ever learn the lessons from history in Washington? The answer to that is no.
Yeah. So I know the answer to that is no. But this is a bad idea, is it not? This idea of reducing the creditworthiness threshold. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to remind people, because people maybe repress this from our memory because it was such a horrific period. But do you know which institution lost the most money? It wasn't Lehman Brothers. It wasn't, all these big firms that went bankrupt. You know which institution needed the biggest bailout?
Fannie Mae.
Fannie Mae. Yeah, Fannie and Freddie. And by the way, there had been a famous Democrat economist literally a year before that who did a famous study for Fannie Mae saying the chances that Fannie Mae would ever need a bailout were 1 in a million. Well, a year later, Fannie Mae needed a bailout. By the way, the people still take that economist seriously. But we're not learning anything. And what we did in the run-up to 2008 is we were just giving mortgages to basically anybody. We weren't checking we didn't see whether they had down payment money. We didn't check their credit ratings. We just had more and more money to these folks, and it just completely crashed. It didn't just crash the economy temporarily. It took us 5 years to recover from that. And so here we are again with a whole slew of stupid policies, and it's a really it makes me very angry because, and by the way, Fannie and Freddie should have been privatized a long time ago. Yeah. And nobody in Washington wants to do that. And what happens is all these former government officials, the people who are elected to Congress and Senate, they leave and then they go get these sweet paying jobs, $5 million a year jobs at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's like a revolving door.
The Big Short Part 2 coming to a theater near you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You don't need. You can remember the stripper who had like 5 mortgages. I think that's what we're going to have under this new policy.
Well, that was not the hope for growth and opportunity I was hoping for from you, but I understand you have to operate on the real world.
This on a positive note, then, Dan. I do think that in about 3 months we're going to see oil prices back to close to where they were before. This is a bump in the road, hopefully, and we'll be back on our way. The question is whether the bump will be so high, people are still angry come Election Day because it could be a bloodbath if people are still mad at Republicans. But they should be mad at Democrats. They're the ones who are making you stand 2 and 3 hours in line at the airport. So remember, if you're caught in one of those lines in O'Hare, remember who to thank for that.
Steve Moore, economist, author of The Trump Economic Miracle and the Plan to Unleash Prosperity Again. Steve, thanks as always.
Okay, Dan, have a good week.
And Steve joins us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
You need a construction company, but who?
Call Croscom.
A construction company you can trust that shares your Christian and conservative values. For decades, Croscom has been doing work in Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana, and Wisconsin. Roofs, siding, windows, doors, gutters, basically everything for your home or business, even